emergency measures. President Trump is calling for Republicans to use the so-called nuclear option to bypass votes needed from Democrats in the Senate. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Lawmakers in Washington, D.C. out of session amid a stalemate and a month-long government shutdown.
It means that tens of millions of American families will struggle to keep food on the table because the SNAP program benefits will run dry. It means that WIC assistance, that's women, infants, and children, the nutrition programs, will be at risk of running dry. It means that Head Start centers, which serve 60,000 children nationwide, will be at risk of closure.
New York has declared an emergency to provide 40 million meals statewide for those who rely on SNAP benefits. It comes as a federal judge weighs ordering the federal government to tap into a $5 billion contingency fund to avoid a lapse in the food stamp program.
This is Congress's fault, not his fault. This is Congress's fault. So when it comes to SNAP, the only solution here is we need to appropriate the money.
Senator Hawley is pushing a bipartisan bill to fund the program until the shutdown ends, but Republican leadership hasn't put the workaround bill on the floor.
It's a bill I'd happily support and vote for. And as soon as Thune would let Hawley put it on the House floor, it will pass. Plain and simple.
Leader Thune says Republicans' short-term funding bill already addresses SNAP benefits.
And we've tried to do that 13 times. And you voted no 13 times. This isn't a political game. These are real people's lives that we're talking about. And you all have just figured out, 29 days in, that, oh, there might be some consequences.
Thune says while talks at the leadership level are stalled, it appears bipartisan talks with rank-and-file Democrats are gaining steam. President Trump, though, is done waiting for Democrat buy-in. He's now calling for Republicans to slash the Senate's 60-vote threshold, called the nuclear option. On a late Thursday post, he wrote, "It is now time for the Republicans to play their Trump card and go for what is called the nuclear option. Get rid of the filibuster and get rid of it now." Democrats tried to eliminate the filibuster during Biden's first 2 years, but 2 Democrat holdouts rejected the move. It would allow for the majority party to pass any legislation on a simple majority vote. Some warn it could erode constitutional guardrails that keep the Senate as a deliberative body. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins addressed Americans a day ahead of the lapse of SNAP benefits. She explained why the Department of Agriculture cannot use contingency funds to cover the food stamps.
So the fact that the Democrats are saying, but wait, USDA has money in their accounts, why it is really their fault, I've seen it over and over and over from some of their leaders, is absolute false, and it is a lie. We have been saying on October 10th we sent messages out, on October 24th we sent messages out. These benefits end on November 1st. Now, let me get down into a little bit of the details on that to better explain. So there is a contingency fund at USDA, but that contingency fund, by the way, doesn't even cover, I think, half of the $9.2 billion that would be required for November SNAP, but it is only allowed to flow if the underlying program is funded. It's called a contingency fund, and by law, contingency fund can only flow when the underlying fund is flowing. So, for example,
Rollins said her message to America is that the government is failing them right now, and poverty is not a red or blue issue. She also mentioned a silver lining that there is now a national conversation on the SNAP program. She noted that the cost of the SNAP program rose to new highs during the Biden administration. She said under President Trump, the USDA is making the program more accountable. She said they're stopping illegal immigrants from receiving benefits and rooting out fraud and abuse. Rollins called on Senate Democrats to vote for the continuing resolution and not to hold vulnerable families hostage. Democrats are holding out for extended Obamacare subsidies and walking back Medicaid cuts before agreeing to a short-term funding plan. The president's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, said the government shutdown is a negative for the economy. Hassett spoke to reporters at the White House this morning.
The U.S. economy is very strong. We're looking at third quarter GDP that's close to 4% growth and, excuse the lots of wind, And I think that that's a momentum that will carry forward. The government shutdown is looking like it might reduce that number quite a bit, especially going into the fourth quarter. And but the momentum from all of President Trump's policies is really, really strong.
President Trump has called for Senate Republicans to eliminate the filibuster to end the government shutdown. Joining us to discuss is Bart Marcois, a former career diplomat, Energy Department official, and presidential campaign policy advisor. Now he's president of Marcois Partners International Corporation. And we have Robin Byro, a Democratic strategist and former Obama regional campaign director. So good afternoon to you both. Now, before we get into the filibuster debate, news just broke moments ago in the SNAP case that the federal government has been ordered to use contingency funds for SNAP's food aid payments during the shutdown. So Bart, your initial reactions to this?
Well, I see these courts, I see these judges making orders superseding the Constitution and superseding American law. It'll be interesting to see whether the administration appeals it. On the basis of principle, they ought to appeal it. On the basis of politics, they may decide not to. But the judge, he or she, has no authority to order that. You heard Secretary Rollins say, without a budget, we are not authorized by law to spend that money. It's not our money to spend until there is a budget. How a judge gets around that, I don't see. But the underlying political pressure, who knows? Who knows what they'll do with that?
So Robin, any thoughts on that?
There are 27 million people in the United States that use the SNAP program. Every $1 that's spent generates another $1.73 in GDP. So we've got to do this. Funds run out, as we all know, tomorrow. My kids go to school, and they go to school with children who largely receive those benefits. There's our families right here in my community that will starve. We're hosting canned food drives. We're picking up tomorrow, in fact. So, we're trying to pick up the slack, but if we can find a way to legally use those funds from the contingency, I would love to do that so that American families don't suffer, Don.
All right, so Bart, what do you think about this? For over 40 million Americans benefit from the federal food assistance. Do you think this situation highlights how perhaps fragile government assistance can be? And do you think has America become too reliant on government assistance as opposed to community bodies like local charities and churches?
Yeah, this really, I think it's over 42 million Americans. It really points up the danger of relying on the government for things. When you rely on the government, then the government giveth and the government taketh away. And it is, people used to think that the government was the bedrock of stability and guarantees. And we see that it's not. We see the Democrats using the word leverage over and over and over, saying, this is our leverage, this is our only leverage. And they're leveraging the human suffering that Robin was just talking about. And when I was a kid, there was government relief available, but when you needed food, you went to a church, you went to your family, you went to your neighborhood association, and people gave freely. And I mean, our church is working very hard to make sure that nobody goes hungry and trying to help fill in other expenses, utilities and rent and things like that. I think most churches have some sort of program to do that. We work hard at the local food bank to make sure that they're full. The demand on them is great, but the community around has risen and met the demand, and the shelves at the food bank are not empty in spite of this increased demand. So yeah, don't rely on the government. Find other charitable sectors. They're much more reliable.
Robin, I think Bart raises a good point there that do you think we need to put more emphasis on strengthening communities to help families overcome difficult times such as this?
Yes, absolutely. And my church is also doing that. Like I said, my kids' Boy Scout troop is organizing a canned food drive tomorrow. I want to say to the viewers, Donations of food and shelf-stable goods are certainly appreciated right now, but I spoke directly with some of our local area food banks. Their funding is actually affected directly because of the government shutdown. So they told me directly that what they need right now are financial donations. So please, by all means, Google your local food banks and help supplement some of their funding, because right now they're not receiving some of the government funds that they usually get to offset their own expenditures. But by all means, also fill up your little neighborhood food pantries. There, it's pretty much at every community. There's a little miniature food pantry somewhere in your neighborhood where people can just drive their cars up and pick out exactly whatever they need. So make sure that those shelves are stocked. Yes. Just like Bart said, the government giveth and the government taketh away. This shows how fragile that system can be, and nobody wants to see Americans starve. This is America. That should never happen here.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bart, back to the topic I mentioned off the top. Do you think, should Republicans use the so-called nuclear option and get rid of this filibuster?
I'm strongly opposed to that. The filibuster is a long-honored time-tested tradition. The Senate is supposed to be the saucer that the hot tea is poured into to cool off. The House passes something. The Senate is where the minority party still exercises some element of control, a great deal of control, to avoid the kind of excesses that you see in some parliamentary systems in Europe. That when the minority party gets a veto, as they have now, as the Democrats have now, even though it irritates me, even though it enrages me, I still want that. I want that veto power to remain. I want there to be a 60-vote margin necessary for anything big, and there's nothing bigger than a budget. We know how to get the budget passed. We call your senators, your Democrat senators. The Republicans have all voted 13 times for a budget. Call your Democrat senators and say, enough with the politics. Open the government, fund the government, vote for the budget. That's how we're supposed to be able to change things. Don't abolish the filibuster. That's my opinion.
Okay, so Robin, how do you feel about the 60-vote threshold?
Bart, I'm literally going to be stealing your talking points about this and using them on my next segment, because that is exactly how I feel. Thank you so much. You made my life
You're
easier.
welcome to them, Robin.
Yeah, exactly. We were in this position as Democrats, and I disagreed with my party then wanting to use the nuclear option at that time during Biden's first 2 years. And if I were, a representative right now elected, I would still feel strongly, just like Bart said, that we need to preserve the filibuster. It exists for a good reason. Yes, I'm extremely irritated with what's going on right now. I don't like that politics are being played in times like this. It's been over a month. This is getting to be ridiculous. But I think there are ways that we can negotiate some things out here. There's one thing right away. There's a so-called poison pill in this bill, whereby the President of the United States would not have to abide by lower court orders if this bill were to pass. I think that needs to go, because we wouldn't want, I'm sure Republicans would not want that used against them if they lose power in 2028 and a Democratic president then has the ability to not abide by court orders. There are things like that. Let's get rid of that, see if there's any wiggle room here where we can negotiate, because we've got to do something. We're in a gridlock.
All right, so Bart, you made your position very clear, but how do you respond to President Trump saying, if Republicans don't do it now, Democrats will just do it in the first day they take office?
They might, and we can't control that. They have done it before. They did it with judges. Harry Reid changed the rules of the Senate to abolish the filibuster for confirming judges. Came to regret that very quickly. Mitch McConnell, the people call him the turtle. I got to say, I've had my differences with Mitch McConnell, but he sure was right. He said, "You're probably going to regret that, and it'll probably be sooner than you think." And boy, was he right. A year and a half later, President Trump was in office, and he nominated 3 Supreme Court justices that went through on a majority vote. If there had been the filibuster, if Reid had not abolished the filibuster for judicial confirmations, we would have had three very different justices on the Supreme Court. I'm glad they're there. I like having them there. I think they're restoring a balance to the court. But yeah, the Democrats might do it, but we can't stop them. We can stop ourselves from doing it. And you start on that slope where each side is doing it every time they have control, and then it becomes a very slippery slope.
So Robin, you and Bart are very much aligned on this issue. So let me play the devil's advocate's part. What do you say to the argument that the filibuster is often used as an obstruction tool?
It exists for a reason. Yes, it is used as an obstruction tool. We saw that, like I said, in President Biden's first 2 years. And it's necessary because, just like Bart said, sometimes there's legislation that gets through the House that just doesn't really, it's not what's needed. The Senate exists as a stopgap measure to prevent bad legislation going through. So, without that, I'm just worried that without checks and balances in place, what might get passed that certainly I, as a Democrat, wouldn't want a Republican majority getting passed through right now. And vice versa, I'm sure that Republicans wouldn't want that if the tables were turned and Democrats had majority control in a couple of years. So no, you start messing with this and you're going to come to regret it, just like Bart said Mitch McConnell cautioned about.
So if a majority of senators, and therefore by extension the voters, support a policy, is it reasonable or not to say that then it should pass?
It's reasonable. It's reasonable to say that, but that's how you get it through the House of Representatives, who have to answer to the voters every 2 years. And they have to be more responsive to the immediate desire of the voters. Only a third of the Senate is up for re-election every 2 years. They have 6-year terms, and they have time for the voters to reflect and to say, you know what, it was 6 years ago and I'm still mad and I'm going to get that SOB out of office. Or to say, wow, 6 years ago, I thought what I really wanted was for that legislation to pass. I am so glad that it didn't pass. I'm so glad that the Senate had to argue more, debate more, negotiate more, and come up with a compromise more, because what we ended up with is not dangerous and it is what we needed. That's the point of it. The founders of the nation and the people who first wrote these rules were trying to avoid the wildfire of populist notion, of demagoguery that could sweep a nation and really burn it up. They were trying to say, let's slow down, cool down, think this over, and at least 2/3 of the Senate have 4 years or 6 years to convince the voters that what they did was right. You're supposed to negotiate in the Senate far more than you are in the House. That's what makes this current stalemate so discouraging.
Okay, Robin, I'll give you the final thought here. Anything you would like to add? How long do you think this shutdown could continue before one side blinks first?
I really hope not much longer. I hope not longer than a week or so, Don. I would also, Bart urged you to call your Democratic representatives. I would also urge people to call their Republican ones. The ACA subsidies are set to expire. Insurance premiums under the ACA, which is also known as the Obamacare. A lot of people, for some reason, don't understand that they're one and the same. The ACA is Obamacare. Contact your Republican representatives, express your concern about your insurance premiums possibly doubling if they don't renew those subsidies. If we can get some movement with Republicans on that, we can unlock this situation and get this passed and get the country working again.
Well, all right, great conversation today, I'd say. Thank you very much to you both, Robin, Bart.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you.
How one teacher transformed a high school journalism class into a media powerhouse. Her hands-off approach and trust in students helped shape a generation of creators and innovators. We'll have that after this break.